Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Phil Goff.
Speaker, the Labor opposition worked constructively on this bill before the Select Committee, but for three predominant reasons we will be opposing this bill. The first and the most important reason is that this bill further entrenches the ideological view of the National Party that the deprivation of liberty of a person properly for having seriously offended against the law should be the subject of a profit motive, should be run by the private sector as a commercial undertaking. Labor is fundamentally opposed to that ideological view of the National Party. Yes, we believe that prisons need to be run efficiently and cost effectively, but no evidence was adduced to show that privatisation of prisons would achieve that particular outcome. What this bill does is pass from the Chief Executive Officer of the Department of Corrections, a public servant, certain powers that will be delegated to private sector contractors, such as the security classification of an inmate and the temporary release of an inmate. Our view is that those are functions that are properly carried out by the public service, not by a private contractor whose principal motivation in running the business will be to maximise profit. And when you are focused on maximising profit, you cut corners. And you cut corners most often by reducing staff. And the evidence is very clearly there in private contracted prisons that they have cut staff, and the inmate staff ratios have increased to the detriment of public safety and to the detriment of the proper running of those prisons. I want to come back to contract management of prisons and why we're against it in a little more detail in a moment. But the second reason that we're against this is that it puts in a provision relating to strip searching of inmates that requires that the most intrusive, the most intimate form of strip searching applies across the board. At the moment there is two types of strip searching. And I understand that in a prison where contraband can be smuggled into the prison at risk to the inmate, at risk to the staff, at risk to the way in which that institution is run, that on occasions you do need strip searching. But at the moment there is a routine strip search where the inmate is simply required, undressed, to squat, so that something that may be concealed internally will come out if it is not deeply concealed. The other more intimate form of strip searching actually involves the use of lights and mirrors to illuminate the genital and the anal areas of the inmate. And that is deeply intrusive, it's deeply unpleasant, both for the inmate but also for the prison officer. And if this form of strip searching was required in every case, then you'd think that the group that would benefit most from that, the prison officers, would have been in favour. Were they in favour, Mr. Speaker? No, they were absolutely opposed to this. They said, this is not necessary, this is not the right way to do it, and this is going to make our staff members more liable to assault by inmates. And we have a clear problem and a clear trend in prisons at the moment of increasing levels of assaults. We owe it to the people who have to work in those rather toxic environments to listen to what they're saying to us. And they were saying to us, don't do it this way. This is the wrong way to go. And it wasn't just the prison officers that said that this was the wrong way to go, it was the Ombudsman. And the representative, or one of the representatives of the Ombudsman's office, was a former inspector of prisons who said that this provision is liable to abuse and gave examples of how strip searching had been abused in certain cases, such as at the Mangaroa prison, the Hawke's Bay Regional Prison, in order specifically to humiliate and to take advantage of prisoners. So you have to listen to what the Ombudsman Office says, because it's set up as the watchdog to advise Parliament as to the right way and the wrong way of going about it. And the Law Society made the same point. And all of them would be able to draw on the fact that there is not an increasing problem of smuggling contraband into prisons that might even justify examining this approach. To the contrary, when Labor assumed office in 1999, the rate of positive testing of inmates for drugs was a whopping 36%. Over a third of the inmates were managing to get drugs in prison. Apparently easier to get drugs in prison than outside in those days. We tightened up the rules governing search and the security of prisons. We invested in more secure prisons, and that rate was reduced to today, I think it's about 5%. From 36% of prisoners using drugs down to 5%. That actually suggests that what was being done was working, and that what was being proposed here was not necessary. I specifically asked the manager of the Rimutaka prison, one of our biggest prisons in this country, whether that sort of strip searching would be a good way of stopping contraband coming in. And his answer was frank. He said, if you internally conceal the contraband you're trying to get in, this will not work. Prison officers said to us, if you really have good grounds to suspect that somebody is smuggling, it might be a weapon, or it might be drugs, or it might be something else, then you put them in a dry cell, and nature will take its course, and whatever is concealed internally will emerge. That is the way to do it, not what is proposed here. So what I can't understand, Mr. Speaker, is why the Minister, when presented with this evidence by groups like prison officers, by the Ombudsman's Office, by the New Zealand Law Society, why those submissions were ignored. Why were they ignored? We never had an explanation from the Minister. The third thing about this bill that concerns me is about the SOP brought in at the 11th hour in relation to smoking in prisons. I, for one, and the Labor Party, is in favour of prisons being smoke-free. But we have in this country a constitutional provision. If you want to change the rules in areas like this, you bring that in the form of a bill to the House takes it to a select committee, we hear submissions, we get expert advice, we iron out the wrinkles in it, we get it right, and constitutionally we pass the change in rules. Is that what Judith Collins did? Absolutely not. Like Henry VIII, she said, by decree, there will be no smoking in prisons. And she was warned that she didn't have the constitutional authority to do it. But such is the arrogance of that minister, the former Minister of Corrections. She ignored the advice, and what do we get? We get a notorious prisoner in Auckland prison taking a case to court and defeating this government. A prisoner defeating this government because he was able to work out that the government hadn't done it right. Well, back in court next week, my colleague said, and that may well be the case. Why may that be the case? Because this was brought directly to the House without the opportunity for the Select Committee to examine it, without us as parliamentarians to be able to ask the Ministry of Justice the searching questions to see whether they've got it right, without the opportunity for submitters from the public and expert submitters to come to the Select Committee and say, yes, finally the government has got it right. But no, they rush it in. They bring it in without notice, without discussion at the Select Committee, and the chances are they will get that wrong again. I just want to say this, finally, going back to the question of privatisation of prisons. Serco is the private contractor given the job of running Mount Eden Prison and the planned Wirral Prison. They went to the London Stock Exchange on 9/11 of last year, September the 11th, to boast that they will make $30 million a year out of running the Wirral Prison. $30 million. So that, Mr. Speaker, is $30 million from the New Zealand taxpayer that will go out of this country to line the pockets of the private investors in Serco. Do they have a track record of running these things well? Not in Australia, not in the UK, and not here in Mount Eden. In the first year of running that prison, they released 3 inmates that should not have been released. They kept in another 3 inmates who should properly have been released, and they allowed one to escape. and they failed to meet 19 out of 37 performance standards that were set down for them. They are not efficient, they are not cost effective, and the profit motive is wrong.
Sorry to run the honourable member. I call Jackie Dean.
Speaker rising to speak to the